Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're listening to us from in the world. This is Jake Claver with the Future of Fortunes podcast with my partner in crime, Byron Wolf. How are you, Byron?
I'm great, brother. I'm great, man. Happy to hop in this. So we were just chatting about market manipulation and the crypto markets, which ties in with your NFT, your metaverse. We were talking about like the political insight, some of the news that's going out. We decided today we're going to talk a little bit about the market manipulation, but also how a lot of these things that are coming in politically will affect us going into regulation. So, Jake, I'll let you. Yeah, I just did the intro, but I'll let you further the intro.
So, a few articles come out this week talking about how if there's not regulation brought in, that the markets could collapse on themselves, which we've seen. A lot of that already happened already with Luna, and then we had FTX with the exchanges, multiple other large companies like BlockFi, Barry Silbert's going under.
Yeah.
Anyway, with that, I think this is an excuse for them to regulate the market, which I'm actually a little bit excited about because it needs regulation. And once the regulation comes in, then these traditional financial institutions can move into the market and establish, which projects are going to be the winners, which ones aren't. Get a lot of this, the rug pulls that exist, and a lot of the market manipulation, like you alluded to before, will leave the market. It won't be as easy for these large institutions to come in and dump $1 billion into one project and manipulate the market or suppress it. Or saw some things last week where all of these large institutions have trading desks for crypto, regardless of if they're reporting it or not. And if you had, let's just say you had $1 billion market cap on something. If you got $100 million or $1 billion and you could double the market cap of a project and you buy, like, everybody is going to believe that thing's going to the moon because it's going to jump, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So everybody jumps on board. You see something run up 25-30% a day. I'm piling in on it. So does everybody else because they get FOMO. And then you get rubbed because the institution pulls all their money out and more than what they took, or more than what they put in. So if they want a 10% yield or a 10% gain, that's easy to get in 48 hours in the crypto market. It could take months or years in traditional markets. And so it's very tempting if you have large amounts of money, as these institutions do, to come in and manipulate the markets and then take advantage of retail. And obviously, we don't like that. We prefer that retail investor were to be taken care of, and people will be upset. Retail enjoys the gambling that is the crypto market currently, and that's it's all speculation. There's no utility. There's nothing really behind any of these besides the promise of what they're supposed to deliver in the future. Same thing with the NFTs. I say that the NFTs, there are some that actually do have some real world utility. But again, the legal framework around that's not been set. So I'm concerned that Yaga Labs that put out Bored Ape Yacht Club could probably come under some scrutiny later on for the lands of the meta and the other things that they've done. Their token that they launched in correlation with that could be considered an ICO. Is it a security? Is it an investment contract? There's just a lot of legalities that have not been ironed out yet. And as that comes to fruition, I think it's going to stabilize the markets in ways that, again, will be disappointing to some, but refreshing to others like myself.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the sad truth is they're still very easy to manipulate in that aspect. And there is no regulation really that's in there. And so instead of the politicians that are involved in this, like saying, hey, we just need regulation because we know, as majority of people, they hear the word regulation and they just scared to death and like, oh, we don't need it. Yeah, government in my stuff. Like, but, and there's a lot of things that are way overregulated. So like, I agree with that mentality for the most part. But in this case, there's definitely not enough regulation in the crypto markets. And so there definitely needs to be more place there, to somewhat to protect people, but also so you kind of know where you're at. Like, when I'm working with people, I'm crypto tax certified. And so like I work with a lot of people that have the crypto and they're like, well, hey, if I do this, then this. And like the crazy thing is a lot of times like that answer comes with like right now, this is the way it needs to be handled, but that could change. Or under current laws or under current, not even really laws, like recommendations almost. This is how we need to handle it, and we're ahead of the curve, which is good because you're doing it now while we're trying to interpret what they've got going out. But there's not really like a lot of hard, clear cut recommendations or laws or whatever procedures for that. So we kind of have to do what we think is best. And it almost always relates to something else, right? So like metaverse is a great spot for this. Digital real estate. So we mirror some of the real estate laws, rules, regulations, but then we also have to regulate some like securities and other non-tangible asset rules, regulations, procedures. Because metaverse isn't physical property, it's different, like it's virtual. And so, we have to be careful with how we deal with things. We have to be constantly reacting to whatever the IRS says, puts out, whatever, kind of use best case judgment. So like a couple of big things, Ted Cruz came out, he's pushing to do the government contracts for like small transactional crypto things. Like great examples, he wants to the vending machine company that handles all the vending machines at the Capitol and a lot of the government buildings. They also have some, I think it's built in so you can pay crypto. So Ted Cruz is pushing to bring that in to all the government entities, so that's available. Big move, bold move. If the government is accepting cryptocurrency, they're essentially saying, yeah, we're good with it. Then you have Elizabeth Warren saying that the markets are going to crash on themselves, which, some have. I'm not saying she's completely wrong, but yeah, it's going to happen. So of course she's over here, Chicken Little, saying the whole thing's going to collapse. It's going to come down. Everybody's going to lose everything, blah, blah, blah. You've got a lot of the big investment advisors for like small investors, non-accredited, some, larger, small people, then some smaller, accredited, saying like they're calling for a reduction in your crypto holdings from 5% to 1% of your holdings. 5% is already very low. So 1%, I mean, what are you even in?
Why do you even have a position if it's just 1% of your portfolio?
Yeah. If it's 1%, I mean, you might as well just bet on black or red or something. I mean, it's just not enough really for it to matter.
Before, right? So the piece for me that I wish they would have done better for this when it comes to regulation. In the early 2000s, we had the internet, right? And we had the crazy tulip bubble that was the .com boom. We had things like pets.com that went for billions of dollars. That was just a domain name. It didn't really do anything. And then they brought in regulation around that, but they brought in regulation that fostered the innovation here in the US and gave clear regulatory frameworks that allowed the companies here to take advantage of that technology moving forward and really establish themselves as the biggest players in the world for that. And I wish that we would have been as forward-facing with this technology as we were with the internet, but we haven't been. There's jurisdictions like Singapore, the UAE, that are way ahead of us. The UK is way ahead of us in their regulations for these things. And so because of that, we've seen a lot of companies either leave the US or not even start their company here. They started them over there in those jurisdictions because there was legal framework around how they should do that and the tax laws and all the stuff we discuss on here. So hopefully we get a global framework, that everybody kind of has their spin off of, there's a base layer, like this is how this should be handled, because the world is very global at this point. And I think, I don't know if it'll be the UN, the World Economic Forum, the IMF, we have these global bodies, and you can have your opinions about that. I'm not here to take sides on if that's good or bad. But the globalization of the world has happened. And in order for it to be constructive and for everybody to work on a level playing field, there needs to be that framework in place. And then again, each nation can then have their own spin-off of that. So what I would hearken that to is we have federal laws and then we have state laws, right? So the federal laws apply across everybody. And then we have state laws that are different jurisdiction to jurisdiction. This is most prevalently seen or what industry has been affected by this recently has been the marijuana industry, right?
Yeah.
It's still illegal to distribute marijuana federally, but we have state laws that allow you to do that in a regulated manner. So,
and infrastructure.
right.
Like we've created it and we have rules, we have procedures, like there's laws that exist, and the federal government has expanded some of theirs for this, while also double speak, in my opinion, leaving it illegal. Like, so why are you having stuff that comes into play for that? Like, I mean, hell, you can go buy a stamp to sell an illegal substance to avoid getting hit with the taxes on the sale of that illegal substance. Like, how does that, if it's illegal, it's illegal, right? Like there shouldn't be a process under that, right? But there is. So just, to me, and I've said this before, I really feel like it's not legal, and I'm talking about the weed situation, but like I feel like it's not legal because it would cost the federal government more money than to make it, legal for all the people that are incarcerated, have arrests, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I just think it costs more money. So we're just going to leave it illegal until we hit that tipping point where it makes sense to make it legal, because then, it doesn't cost us money for this.
Would offset the costs that are going to,
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of these green companies, I advise on some of these, but like almost all of them are holding that tax back, that assumed tax back, because when it does happen, the federal government won't say, all right, cool, we're going to make it legal now. They're going to say, okay, we're going to make it legal, but then we're going to retroactive all of it. So like everything you're doing is illegal as of this point. So you owe us the taxes on all this stuff going back, or we're going to go this route. So like, do you want it civil? Do you want it criminal? Like, do you want to pay? You want to go to jail? It may not be that simple, but that's my opinion. Like, that's where I see it.
Probably the likely scenario for it, but that's just another point as to how messed up the regulation is here in the US around an emerging industry. I deal with business owners and SOPs, right? So like, I wish they had a process that was better suited for this when emerging technologies came out, so that they could regulate them quickly in a way that would foster innovation, right?
Yeah.
But they don't have that. They just kind of fly by the seat of their pants, and when it becomes a problem, like the cryptocurrencies are right now, in that industry, like they can't ignore it anymore. That we've had
absolutely not.
Cases, some people lose hundreds of millions of dollars at this point.
Yeah.
And now people are screaming for regulation because of that happening. And so I just wish that they were proactive instead of reactive, I guess.
I agree. And like the market reacts to that, right? And so it's been a minute, but Coinbase settled their big lawsuit, $100 million. So somewhere near that, like I'm sure somebody will fact correct me on that, but I think it was big money. So let's call it $100 million, whatever it was, right? So they decided they settled this thing. Like literally they had a 12% jump in their stock price on that announcement. So we got to pay $100 million to get out of this thing, right? Like slap on the wrist, whatever you want to call it. That's sad that $100 million is a slap on the wrist, but it is what it is. Big money in these markets.
They make at least $100 million in the market.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. So they have this jump, right? So, okay, cool. That pain point's over. We've released the tension of that pain point, this like horrible thing that's hanging over our head. And at least we know going forward, like what the kind of the rules are. We know like what we need to do. And so like, I feel like the 12% didn't come from the settlement of the, hey, well, we only have to pay $100 million, whatever it was. I feel like it came from, all right, cool. We've got that under control. We can move on to the next problem, solve the pain point by finding a settlement. Let's go on. Like Jake and I, huge fans of Ripple, like probably need to do the disclosure at this point. But like, I feel like as soon as that lawsuit is settled, like it's going to be a big jump because we have solved the pain point, right? And now we know what's going on and we move forward. And that's a huge pain point. Like for multiple cryptos, huge pain point, huge case, right? But like we need settlement in that. Like if anybody's listening that can affect that, like let's settle this stupid thing. Let's get this over with. I'm ready to make some money.
This is speculation.
Yeah.
I know a few people have had conversations, so I can say this with confidence. I believe that settlements have been offered.
Yes.
And not accepted by Ripple because they didn't have forward guidance for XRP moving forward.
Yeah.
They were going to be that situation with Coinbase where it was a slap on the wrist, and then they weren't going to be able to use XRP in the secondary market or sell it any longer. And that's their business model. Like that's so often people all do the disclaimer. None of this is financial advice. Always consult with your financial advisor before making any investment decisions. Anything said here is for educational, informational purposes only. There you go. There's so.
Yes, need that.
But I see so many people say that they could, fork the network and use this other token or do something else, or it's a rug pull, or no, they didn't spend 10 years trialing this one specific currency inside their software and build their entire balance sheet and their valuation of the company on the valuation of that token for them to swap to something else. Like that's not what happened. So the lawsuit is huge for Ripple. It's huge for PolySign, who has David Schwartz and Arthur Brito from Ripple on their board, along with Jack McDonald from BNY Mellon for 30 years. They're going to be a gigantic player after this. And once XRP is free and clear, they can use that in their software. So there's Bank of America is another one of those. They've been a Ripple partner since 2018. They've got blockchain patents, like more than 72 of them, and some of them involve Ripple's technology, right? But they can use that stuff until there's clarity for the token. And it really doesn't matter if it's a security or not. At the end of the day, they just need to decide what it is and how it's taxed. And that will drive the adoption of it. But until there's actual clarity around what the token is moving forward, they've stymied the innovation here in the US for that project.
100%. And so I like what you brought up, the BOA, Bank of America, if you don't know the designation. So they recently made it, and I just pulled this up because I want to read it directly from, I don't want to paraphrase it. So they said digital currencies such as central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, and stablecoins are the natural evolution of money and payments, right? CBDCs do not change the definition of money, but will likely change how and when value is transferred over the next 15 years. The potential to revolutionize global financial systems and may be the most significant technological advance in the history of money. So one of the biggest banks out there, right? Bank of America. Let's just think about that. Bank's in the name, America's in the name. This is big, right? Are basically saying hey man, these CBDCs are going to be it. They're going to change it. They're going to change everything. This isn't a fad. This isn't an add-on. This is like a changing of the banking system that we have no regulation on. We have very little insight into how the federal government is going to handle this stuff. Multiple lawsuits out there. Come on, guys. We gotta do something. We gotta change something. The government's got to come in and they gotta say, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to do this, or we're going to hand this over. You and I have talked about this. Central bank. It's not a government industry, right? It's owned by people. So if they can't do it, and we have all these brilliant minds in this system, right? Then let's hand it over. Let's hand this over to somebody and let them do it. Let's have them regulate it. Let's have them set the parameters. How is this going to work, right? So right now, we're dragging this albatross behind us, trying to move forward with the banking system, with the currency system, with the transfer of wealth, transfer of assets, liabilities, you name it. And we can't do it because we know it needs to be regulated. We know they're going to come in eventually, but we can't move forward because the overwhelming, oversight doesn't exist and we don't have it. So where is it? Let's go.
It makes sense that the US would be the laggard on this because we do have the global reserve currency, right? And so if there was a technology that would displace the dollar as the global liquidity mechanism, people here would probably be hesitant to adopt that and probably would do a lot of things in order to stymie that to keep it from happening. But at some point, we're going to exceed the amount of debt that we can handle. And they're going to have to, it's just, if you know who Ray Dalio is, I would encourage you to go read his last book that he put out. But he talks about the last 5 events that have occurred over the last 500 years where the global reserve currency changed. And we're at that point again. We're at that inflection point. And so after the sanctions with Russia, which we've talked about before on here, it's become pretty apparent that that's likely going to happen in the short term, next 1 or 2 years. And we've got all these other countries already trialing CBDCs that will operate outside of the SWIFT system, right? So we've got Saudi Arabia selling oil to other countries, not in US dollars.
Yeah.
That dollar is no longer in existence.
Yeah.
And so it's just a changing of the guard. And again, it makes sense that the US would be late to the game on this, because if you are the leader, you don't want to be, you want to stay the leader, right?
Yeah.
If
100%.
you figure out how to do that, you at least want to remain in the game. And I think the US will. I think we still have the largest GDP in the world, right? By far. We're a huge consumer economy, and we'll sit in the SDR, or the special drawing right that the IMF puts out. And they have a basket of currencies. And so that's probably what ends up being a global reserve currency that was proposed in 1944 at Bretton Woods. John Maynard Keynes brought up the Bancor concept, which then became the SDR. So it's probably the way it ends up going. But again, until we have regulation here in the US, the rest of the world is also hesitant to adopt that, because we still have the world's largest military.
Yeah.
And we want to avoid World War III. We don't want that.
That's important.
Yeah, we don't even want any more bloodshed. So I think things are starting to be worked out in the background. They wouldn't be trialing these CBDCs otherwise. The US has a trial for the CBDC that ends February 7th. So what was that, like 11 days, 10 days?
Yeah.
And then that trial period's over. And then, at some point this year, they'll likely implement it. Ripple had come out and said that 50% of the world would be operating using CBDCs by 2024. So this is January 2023. We got 11 months till 2024.
Yeah.
And for you to have half the world on that network and using those things, makes sense to me that you'd probably have to get it out a little bit earlier in the year to get that amount.
Yeah.
So again, nothing said here is financial advice, but hopefully the lawsuit with Ripple is handled. We get regulation moving forward around CBDCs and bridge currencies that allow those to swap between one another trustlessly. And then we can start making other iterations on top of those in regard to NFTs, value transfer of assets, and then also, eventually they'll get to the metaverse and DAOs.
Yeah. And as they build that, it will apply to everything that comes behind it, right? So like a lot of people like, well, if they're gonna do this, and but the reality is like they'll start, I feel like, in that crypto space, and that will affect a lot of that, but all of that regulation will be done in a way that it will affect the NFTs, the metaverse, and the DAO, and like everything that's going to come behind it. Like, I don't think we're quite to the point now where we know exactly we don't even know what everything the internet can do, right? Like we're going into Web3, which is going to change everything, and I don't think anybody, when this first thing started, thought anything of Web3, right? Like it's progressed. So as these things happen, as they move forward, we're going to find out like there's a lot more regulation to this. I think the adoption will be good. Like Jake, you and I have talked about the concept of like a person is the bank, right? Like it won't necessarily be a currency or like what you hold or your accounts or whatever. Like you are what you are, you hold what you have, right? And so the transfer will literally be from Jake to Byron, not Jake to his BOA that is a Zelle account, and then the Zelle account is transferred over to here and moves its way up, whatever.
All the intermediaries that sit in here and take fees right now could be displaced completely by the adoption of these networks.
Yeah. And as crazy as that sounds, that's essentially the whole premise of the Web3, right? Is you now own your data and you get paid for your data. Like that's the premise, right? And it probably seemed insane, right? Like, insane in the membrane level, right? Like, 10, 20 years ago, that's where we're heading. It's coming, right? We'll be there. Like that's going to be a thing. So 100%. I don't know what our time looks like, but yeah, I think
we're probably coming to the end of it here. As always, just really appreciate you guys joining us, the people that listen to this, and hope we're providing you some value. If you do have anything that you would like to, hear us talk about, you're more than welcome to reach out to us on our social media accounts. Always love to hear what our fans are looking at. But with that, we'll see y'all on the next one.
Thank you.
Good.